قد أفلح المؤمنون.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل Muhammad. Respected Muslim brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome back to another one of our biographies. And today we are going to do a biography that has been requested of me for a very, very long time. And that is the biography of Sayyidah Zainab. As usual, before we do these biographies, a short introduction is in order as to why the personality we are covering is important. So, Sayyidah Zainab, salamullahi alayha, Zainab bint Ali ibn Abi Talib, is a very, very important person to the hearts and minds of Shia all over the world, particularly the brothers and sisters of Sham, people of Syria, the people of Lebanon. Zainab's name is symbolic of it's symbolic of the justice that we seek for what happened to the Ahlulbayt alayhim salam in Karbala. See that many poets, many scholars, whenever they bring up the story of Karbala, they use a Sayyidah Zainab because she serves as the personification of the dhulm that occurred to the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And so often you see her name being used as a slogan, as a cry for vengeance, as a cry, urging on the chivalry of Shia men, of Arab men, as a reminder not to let what happened at Karbala happen again. And so Sayyidah Zainab, her personality, her figure looms large in the tragedy of Karbala. However, when it comes to her biography, when it comes to her life, we find that sometimes it can be very difficult to piece it together. And so therefore today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going over the most authentic, the most reliable sources that we could find regarding her life. And inshallah, that will give you all a better understanding of her, who she was, and some of the famous lessons from her life. So, the other thing I do want to go over is that Sayyidah Zainab salamullahi alaiha is very characteristic of something that we often go over when it comes to women in Islamic history. And that is the fact that when it comes to women and the biographies of women in Islamic history, oftentimes the details of their biography are very, very scarce. And this is not necessarily something negative. Like a lot of people may look at this and say, oh, Muslim historians are sexist. This is not true. This is absolutely not true. The reason why we know this is because, for example, you have Muslim historians who write books on the life of Aisha or other prominent female personalities in Islamic history. That being said, the issue when it comes to the biographies of many of these women, particularly the women of the Ahlul Bayt, is that uh, in order to narrate something about a woman's life, you have to be someone, you want a primary source, someone who had contact with this woman. And so obviously, if it's another woman, well, then there's the issue of how do you get a non-mahram to communicate with her, if that makes sense? Especially if it's a woman who keeps to herself, especially if it is a woman who stays in her own home, who does not typically go out, essentially. So with that being said, when it comes to Sayyidah Zainab salamullahi alayha, of course she fell into this category, is that she is a Muslim woman who we do not have that much data on. Even though she is such a prominent figure in the hearts and minds and the imaginations of many people, the number of reports that we have on her is nowhere near as much as, say, her brothers Al-Hasan wal-Hussein, or even her mother Sayyidah Fatima. But with that being said, we will go over the reports that we do have. So the first report that we're going to be going over is Kitab al-Ghaiba by Shaykhun al-Tusi, rahmatullahi alayh. In Kitab al-Ghaiba, we have this report, and this report is a very fascinating report. It's a very interesting report. It's one of the few reports that we have that directly talks about Sayyidah Zainab in such a way. So in Kitab al-Ghaiba, and this is, of course, these are ahadith related to the ghaiba of the Imam of our time, Sahib al-Asr wal-Zaman, Ajallah Faraja. So he narrates with his isnad to a man by the name of Ahmad ibn Ibrahim, who says, I went to Sayyidah Hakima, who is the daughter of Imam Muhammad ibn Ali al-Ridha. She was the daughter of Imam al-Jawad, and the sister of Abu al-Hasan, salamullahi alayh, Imam Ali al-Hadi, salamullahi alayh. Okay, so she is considered the aunt of Imam al-Askari and the great aunt of the Imam of our time. And she says, I went to visit her in the year 262. So I conversed with her from behind the curtain and asked her about religion. So she named to me the Imam she followed, and then she said, and al-Hujjah ibn al-Hasan ibn Ali, and she mentioned his name. And I asked her, I said to her, may I be sacrificed for you? May I be your ransom? Do you say this on the basis of observation, or on the words of the infallible? So she said the words of Aba Muhammad, which he wrote to his mother. So I asked, where is then the son? Where is the son then? So she replied, he is in hiding. So then he says, I asked, to whom are the Shia to turn for guidance? So she replied, to the grandmother, the mother of Aba Muhammad. Salamullah alayh. So then I asked, who has he emulated in assigning a woman as his deputy? So I want to stop here and do some sharh, because sometimes these hadith, for some of our brothers or sisters who are not, specialized in the study of these things, may find this a little confusing. Essentially, what he is saying here is that I went to Sayyidah Hakima and I started asking her about the matters of deen, the matters of aqa'id, of the correct belief. And so she told me, she started telling me that I believe in these imams, and of course she mentioned, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and after him his successor Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullah alayhi, all the way till Imam al-Askari salamullah alayhi, and her nephew, and then she mentioned al-Hujjah ajjallahu faraj al-Sharif. So he asked her, this man Ahmad ibn Ibrahim is asking her, he says to her, is this on the basis of observation or on the word of the infallible? So he's asking her, his son, is this what you believe? Is this just your observation that he has to have a successor? It's his son? Or did you hear this from a ma'soom? And she says, no, I got it from the ma'soom. Like Imam al-Askari salamullah alayhi, my nephew, he made it clear that his son is his successor. He gave the nas that his son is his successor. Correct? And this is why this report is in Kitab al-Ghaiba. So he asked, okay, where is he? He says, he is in hiding. So then he asks her, well, where are the Shia? Where are we supposed to turn for guidance? Because the Imam is in Ghaiba. So she says to him, to the grandmother, the mother of Aba Muhammad. Salamullah alayh. The mother of Aba Muhammad is Imam al-Askari's mother. Correct? So this man, Ahmad ibn Ibrahim, is a bit shocked. He says, wait a minute. How can the Imam appoint a woman as his deputy? This has never been done before. There is no nas for this. And so Sayyidah Hakima replies to him. He said, she tells him he is emulating his ancestor, al-Imam al-Hussein, salamullah alayh, because al-Imam al-Hussein, salamullah alayh, he assigned his sister Zainab bint Ali, alayha salam, in the superficies, correct, in the outward matters. The learning and the knowledge come from Ali ibn al-Hussein, that coming from Ali ibn al-Hussein was attributed to Zainab bint Ali, salamullah alayh, in order to maintain secrecy over Ali ibn al-Hussein. Then she said, you are scholars of narrations. Have you not narrated that the inheritance of the ninth from the sons of al-Hussein ibn Ali will be divided during his lifetime? So, to clarify what's going on here, Imam al-Hasan al-Askari, he threw a curveball at his enemies, the Banu al-Abbas and their ilk. What he did was, in his wasiyah, he left everything to his mother. And so this was in order to confuse his enemies, in order to make it clear to them, to make it seem to them that he died without a successor. Correct? And as we know from our studies of the Imam Sahib Zaman's life, that he was sent away to Medina, and his birth was kept secret, his life up until that point was kept secret, and his arrival at his father's funeral was a complete shock. And so we see that, similar to what Imam al-Sadiq salamullah alayhi did in order to deceive al-Mansur, Imam al-Askari has a plan. And this, of course, this is not the first time that we've seen this, because as Sayyidah Hakima salamullah alayha says, Sayyidah Zainab alayha salam, she served in that same capacity. That outwardly, when you look at what happened to the Ahlulbayt alayhim salam, we look at the aftermath of Karbala, most of the men had been killed. Correct. Most of the men had been killed. The companions of Aba Abdullah had been killed defending him, and so his only surviving son was Imam Ali ibn al-Hussein. However, Imam Ali ibn al-Hussein was not exactly in a position to proclaim that he is the Imam and to call to himself. And as we know, he was very sick and he was very physically weak during the ordeal of the tragedy of Karbala. And so the person who essentially was the deputy, the one who represented him, the one who was there to essentially redirect all those issues was a Sayyidah Zainab. And so this report is one of the more fascinating reports about Sayyidah Zainab, is that she is one of the deputies of our Imams. She was the deputy of Imam al-Hussein. And so this is where you hear sometimes a lot of people say that, Zainab was Imam al-Hussein's diplomat. She was his representative. We say that's not exactly true. We would say that the diplomat of Abu Abdullah was Sayyidina Muslim ibn Aqil. But if you want to look at her as the dignitary of Imam al-Hussein, the deputy of Imam al-Hussein, similar to the deputies of Ali, alayhi salam, similar to the deputies of al-Hasan and the later Imams, then this is actually very fascinating. This is very cool. The fact that we see that Sayyidah Zainab has that role, which is not often discussed. Right? Now, when it comes to the biography of Sayyidah Zainab, I don't have a report on hand for her birth, but we know that she was born during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She is technically considered a sahabiya saghira, which means that she was very, very young when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away. So this brings me to my next point, and that is that a Sayyidah Zainab, a nickname that she is often given, or a title that she is often referred to by, is the title al-Masa'ib, which means the mother of the tragedies, Sahibatul Masa'ib, because Sayyidah Zainab, if we just do a quick timeline of her life, when she was very young, she lost Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Say, okay, maybe she was too young to perceive that tragedy. And then when she was young, she lost Sayyidah Zahra salamullahi alaiha. And then, she gets older, she loses Amir al-Mu'mineen. Then the martyrdom of al-Hasan, and then she was there with Imam al-Hussein. She witnessed him getting killed, correct? And then she is taken captive. A Muslim noblewoman, a Hashemite noblewoman, the granddaughter of Rasulullah, is taken captive and paraded throughout the Muslim world before being placed in front of the tyrants Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad and his master Yazid ibn Muawiyah, alayhim la'inullah. So the life of a Sayyidah Zainab, one could look at it and say that it was almost entirely tragedy. It was one tragedy after the other. And we say that no one had to suffer through the loss of all 5 of Ashabul Kisa that we know of, other than Sayyidah Zainab and some of the other companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is a massive musibah. Correct? It is a musibah that forces every pen to fall, that forces every speaker to hang their head in silence. It forces the heart to soften, and it forces tears to come to our eyes. فَإِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. As for the statistics on a Sayyidah Zainab's biography, as I said, I could not find a report that specifically goes over the year of her birth. However, I'm sure the historians managed to figure it out using other pieces of evidence. Now, the first report that we're going to go over, or rather, before we go over the report, the other famous thing that we have to mention about Sayyidah Zainab is that she was the wife of Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar, who was her cousin. So, and from this marriage, I believe she had one son. I remember with the 2 brothers, Aun and Muhammad, they were both the brothers of Abdullah ibn Ja'far, but only one of them is the son of a Sayyidah Zainab. Correct? And both of them were martyred in Waqa'at al-Taf. And that is another one of the personal losses that a Sayyidah Zainab went through during her lifetime, is the death of her own son. So the report that I wish to go over, this report can be found in Tarikh al-Tabari, as well as Ansab al-Ashraf by al-Baladhuri and Maqatil al-Talibiyin by Abil Faraj al-Isfahani. And we went over this report in the biography of Imam al-Hussein, salamullahi alayhi. However, it is worth mentioning again. This is a very long report, is a very important report, is a very powerful report. And so we read in Tarikh al-Tabari, and this is the English translation in volume 19, and this can be found on page 117 to 119. The report reads as follows. It says, according to Abi Mikhnaf, from al-Harith ibn Ka'b and Abu al-Dhahhak, from Ali ibn al-Hussein ibn Ali alayhim afdal salatu wassalam, who is Imam al-Hussein's son. He is the Imam. He was there. This is a very good primary source. So he reports, I was sitting on that evening before the morning in which my father was killed, and with me was my aunt Zainab, who was nursing me. And this is because, as we know, Al-Imam al-Sajjad was sick. So he reports, when my father retired with his followers into his tent, and with him was Huway, the Mawla of Abi Dharr al-Ghafari. And Sayyidina Huway, sometimes he's called Huway ibn Jun or Jun bin Huway, who's the famous companion of Aba Abdullah. And he says he was preparing his sword and putting it right, and Imam al-Hussein recited, "Time, shame on you as a friend, at the day's dawning and the sun's setting. How many a companion or seeker will be a corpse? Time will not be satisfied with my substitute. The matter will rest on the mighty one, and every living creature will have to journey along the path." So the next report, he continues, he repeated it twice or three times so that I understood it and realized what he meant. Tears choked me and I pushed them back. I kept silent and I knew that tribulation had come upon us. As for my aunt, she heard what I heard, but she is a woman, and weakness and grief are the qualities of women. She could not control herself. She jumped up, tearing at her clothes, unveiled, and she went to him. She said to him, "I will lose a brother. Would that death had deprived me of life today. My mother Fatima is dead, and my father Ali, and my brother Al-Hassan. You are the Khalifa of those who have passed away, and the guardian of those who remain." Al-Hussein said to her as he looked at her, "O sister, do not let Shaitan take away your forbearance." She replied, "By my mother and father, Ya Aba Abdullah, you have exposed yourself to death. May Allah accept my life for yours." Choking back his grief and with his eyes full of tears, he said, "If the sand grouse are left at night, they will sleep." She lamented, "O my grief, your life will be violently wrenched from you, and that is more wounding to my heart and harsher to my soul." She struck at her face and bent down to her dress and tore it. Then she fell down in a faint. Al-Hussein got up and bathed her face with water, and then he said to her, "Sister, fear Allah and take comfort in the consolation of Allah. Know that the people of the earth will die, and that the inhabitants of heaven will not continue to exist forever. For everything will be destroyed except the face of Allah." And this is an ayah of the Quran. "Who created earth by his power, who sends forth creatures and causes them to return, who is unique and alone. My father was better than I, my mother was better than I, and my brother was better than I. I and every Muslim have an ideal model in the Apostle of Allah." By this and the like he tried to console her, and he said, "Sister, I swear to you, so keep my oath, that you must not tear your clothes, nor scratch your face, nor cry out with grief and loss when I am killed." Then he brought her and made her sit with me. He went out to his followers and ordered them to bring their tents closer together, so that the tent pegs came within the area of each other's tents, so that if they remained among their tents, the enemy could only approach them from one side. And so this is a very sad report. This is a very powerful report that essentially shows us the agony that Sayyidah Zainab felt when she understood that Imam al-Hussein's martyrdom was at hand. And so we continue by reading, and this report can be found in Tarikh al-Tabari, and this is reported a few pages later, volume 19, page 164, and this is one of the more heartbreaking reports about the battle, and this is in the immediate aftermath. Al-Tabari reports with his chain to Qurra ibn Qais al-Tamimi. He reports the following. He says, and this is again after Al-Hussein has been martyred, he says, "I looked at those women as they passed Hussein and the members of his family and his sons. They shrieked and tore at their faces. I turned my horse towards them. I had never seen a sight of women more beautiful than the sight of those women. By Allah, they were more beautiful than wild cows at Yabrin. Among the things that I will never forget the words of Zainab bint Fatima. As she passed the prostrate body of her brother Al-Hussein, she was saying, O Muhammad, may the angels of heaven bless you. Here is Al-Hussein in the open, stained with blood and with limbs torn off. O Muhammad, your daughters are prisoners, your progeny are killed, and the east wind blows dust over them." And the narrator says, "By Allah, she made every enemy and friend weep." The next report that we'll be going over, this report comes from the Majalis of Shaykhun al-Mufid, Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayh. This is in his Amali, and I believe this is Majlis number 38, Hadith number 8. He reports with his Isnad to Hadlam bin Satir, who says, or Hadlam bin Satir, who says, "I arrived at Kufa in Muharram of the year 61 after Hijrah, as Ali ibn al-Hussein was departing with the ladies from Karbala, surrounded by the troops. People gathered to have a sight of them. When he approached with the ladies sitting on unsaddled camels, the women of Kufa began weeping and wailing. I heard Ali ibn al-Hussein say with a feeble voice, as he was exhausted by ailment, and around his neck was a neckband, and his hands were tied to the neck. He said, "Beware, if these women are indeed weeping, then who killed us?" He continues, "And I saw Zainab bint Ali, salamullahi alayha, and I had never seen a lady with all her modesty being so eloquent. It seemed that she spoke in Amir al-Mu'mineen's voice. He said she raised her hand towards the people to silence them, so the breathing slowed and the noises were silence. Then she said, 'All praise be to Allah and His blessings on my father, the Messenger of Allah. Know you, O people of Kufa, people of chicanery and betrayal, may your tears never dry and may your wailing never quieten. Your example is the one who unravels her yarn after it is firmly spun. You take your oaths merely to deceive one another. O people, are there any among you except those suffering from vainglory, blemished by disgrace, and with bosoms full of hatred? Cowards when confronted, helpless before the enemies, violators of oaths of allegiance, wasting their responsibilities. Miserable is what you have forwarded that has incurred the wrath of Allah upon you, and you will be in chastisement forever. So you are crying. Yes, cry a lot and laugh a little, for you have earned its disgrace and its infamy, and you will never be able to wash off the filth stuck to you. You have forsaken and intrigued against the scion of the seal of the prophets, the master of the youths of paradise, refuge of your chosen ones, retreat for the calamities befalling you, landmark to your destination, the highway of your proof. How evil is the burden you bear! Wretched be you, and reverse be your plans. The effort has failed, and hands are full of nothing but dust, and the bargain has sustained a loss. You are laden with the wrath of Allah, and humiliation and abasement has been stamped upon you. Woe unto you! Do you know what liver of Muhammad you have torn apart, and which blood you have spilled, and which nobility you have struck? Indeed, you have come up with a thing abominable and shocking, from which the heavens are about to be rent asunder, the earth split, and mountains fallen to pieces. What you have committed is foolishness and degradation enough to fill the heavens and the earth. Are you then surprised if the heavens rain blood, and the chastisement of the hereafter is even more degrading? So do not take these moments of respite lightly, for he is not prompted by haste, nor is he feared that he will miss the reprised. No, your Lord is ever observant." The narrator continues, "Then she was silent, and I saw people bewildered, their hands on their mouths, and I saw an old man weeping till his beard was drenched. And he said, their elderly are the best among the elderly, and their progeny, when any progeny is taken into account, is never wrong nor discredited." And I wish to comment on this khutbah. According to Ibn Abi Tahir in his book Balaghat al-Nisa, this khutbah is in fact attributed to a Sayyida Kulthum bint Ali, Sayyidah Zainab's younger sister. And so, Allahu A'lam, which is more correct, whether it was a Sayyidah Zainab bint Ali or it was a Sayyida Kulthum. So we just felt, Shaykh al-Mufid believed it was a Sayyidah Zainab, and so we have presented it as such. Continuing on, this next report can be found in Tarikh al-Tabari in volume 19, page 165, and it can also be found in the Majalis of Shaykhuna al-Saduq, rahmatullahi alayh, in Majlis 31, hadith number 3. The report says, and this is reported on the authority of Humayd ibn Muslim, who, as we know, was present during these events. He says, "I then went on to visit Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, la'inahullah." So, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, la'inahullah, was holding an assembly for the people, and I found that the delegation had already come to him, and he had allowed them to enter and had given permission for the people to enter. So I went in with those who entered, and there was the head of Al-Husayn ibn Ali salamullahi alayh placed in front of him. There he was, poking between its teeth with a cane. When Zayd ibn Arqam Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayh saw that he continued to poke the head with his cane, he said, "Raise that cane from those teeth, for by Allah other than whom there is no God, I have seen the lips of the Messenger of Allah kissing those lips." Then he began to weep. And this is something I wish to highlight. I want to draw a parallel between two Sahaba of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If I remember, in Sahih al-Bukhari, Anas ibn Malik, when he saw Ibn Ziyad poking at the mouth of Abu Abdullah, he said to him he was very similar to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As in, he's witnessing this kafir belittling and mocking the head of Abu Abdullah, and the best answer he has is, he was similar to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. However, Zayd ibn Arqam, ridwanullahi ta'ala alayh, he stood up to Ibn Ziyad and he commanded him to cease his disrespect. And so Ibn Ziyad, la'inahullah, snarled back at him, "May Allah make your eyes weep, for by Allah, if it were not for the fact that you are an old man who has become silly and your mind has left you, I would have cut off your head." Zayd ibn Arqam then stood up and left. When he had gone, I heard the people saying, "By Allah, Zayd ibn Arqam said such words, if Ibn Ziyad had heard them, he would have him killed." I then asked, "What did he say?" The people replied to me, "As he passed, he was saying, a slave has been given power, or a slave has given power to a slave, and he has made the people his inheritance. You Arabs are the slaves after today. You killed the son of Fatima when Ibn Marjana ordered you, and he will kill the best among you and enslave the evil among you. You have accepted humiliation. Let destruction come to those who accept humiliation." The report continues. When the head of al-Hussein alayhi salam was brought in with his children, his sisters, and his womenfolk to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, Zainab bint Fatima alayhi salam had dressed in her dirtiest clothes, disguising herself with the maids surrounding her. She came in and sat down. And I wish to highlight something here. Why was Syeda Zainab dressed this way? Essentially what she was trying to do was to draw attention away from herself. So the report says that Ibn Ziyad la'inahullah demanded, "Who is that woman who is sitting down?" And she did not answer him. He repeated the question 3 times, but no one answered him. Then one of her maidservants said to him, "This is Zainab, the daughter of Fatima." Ubaydullah said to her, "Praise be to Allah who has disgraced you, killed you, and revealed the false nature of your claims." And so Zainab alayhi salam replied, "Praise be to Allah who has favored us with Muhammad and has purified us completely from sin. It is not as you say, for he only disgraces the great sinner and reveals the false nature of the profligate." He asked her, "How do you consider how Allah has treated your family?" So she replied, Allah decreed death for them, and they went forward to their resting places. Allah will gather you and us together. You will plead your excuses to him, and we will be your adversaries before him. Ibn Ziyad then became enraged, and he burnt with anger, to which his chief of police, Amr ibn Hurayth, intervened and said, "May Allah make the governor prosperous. She is only a woman. Are women responsible for anything that they say? Do not hold her responsible for her words, or blame her for foolish talk." So Ibn Ziyad, still burning with anger, said to her, "Allah has healed my soul from your tyrant and the rebellious, disobedient members of your family." Zainab alayhi salam then wept and said, "By my life, you have killed the mature of my family, you have ruined my family, you have cut down my young branches, you have pulled out my root. If this satisfies you, then you have your fill." So Ubaydullah then declared, "By my life, this is real bravery. Your father was a brave poet." And she answered him, "What has a woman to do with bravery? Indeed, I have things to distract me from bravery, but what I say is just spontaneous expression." Now, al-Tabari further reports, and this is an example, as we said, that Syeda Zainab was essentially the deputy of Imam al-Hussein, salamullah alayh. And this is an example, yet another example of her fulfilling that role. And this can be found in Tarikh al-Tabari, as well as in Kitab al-Amali, the Majalis of Shaykhuna Saduq, in Majlis 31, Hadith number 3. So in Tabari, on page 165 to 166, we read the following. He reports again to Humayd ibn Muslim, who further narrates, "I was standing by Ibn Ziyad when Ali ibn al-Hussein alayhi salam was presented to him. So he asked him, 'What is your name?' He replied, 'I am Ali ibn al-Hussein.' Ibn Ziyad said, 'Did not Allah kill Ali ibn al-Hussein?' He was silent, so Ibn Ziyad said to him, 'What is wrong with you that you do not speak?' He replied, 'I had a brother who was also called Ali ibn al-Hussein, and the people killed him.' And Ibn Ziyad retorted, 'Allah killed him.' And so Ali alayhi salam fell silent. Ibn Ziyad demanded, 'What is wrong with you that you do not speak?' To which he answered, 'Allah receives the souls at the time of their death. It is not possible for a soul to die without Allah's permission.' Ibn Ziyad shouted, 'By Allah, you are one of them. See whether or not he has matured. By Allah, I think he is a man.' And so a man uncovered him and said, 'Yes, he has matured.' And Ibn Ziyad ordered him to be killed. Ali ibn al-Hussein then asked him, 'Who will make you responsible for these women?' As in, he's telling Ibn Ziyad, or who will you make responsible for these women? He's telling him, if you kill me, then which mahram will these women have? Are you so low that you are willing to send these women to Syria without a mahram to accompany them? because that is against Islamic law. And so the report says that a Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam clung to him and pleaded, "O Ibn Ziyad, haven't you had enough of us? Have you not satiated yourself with our blood? Will you let any of us survive?" She embraced Ali and continued, "I plead to you by Allah, if you are a believer, that if you kill him, you kill me with him." And so Ali ibn al-Hussein called to him, "O Ibn Ziyad, if there is any kinship between you and the family of Ali, send a righteous man to accompany them in a proper Islamic way." So Ibn Ziyad looked at Zainab for a time, and then he looked at the people and said, "How wonderful is kinship. By Allah, I think that she really wants me to kill her with him if I kill him. Leave the boy, go with your women." So essentially we see that Imam al-Hussein, rather Ali ibn al-Hussein alayhi salam and Sayyidah Zainab, they shamed Yazid, essentially, or Ibn Ziyad, in front of the people who had congregated there. And so, feeling humiliated, he reluctantly agreed with Ali ibn al-Hussein's proposal. "I'll let you live," essentially, because they need a mahram to accompany them to Syria. So now we'll go over the reports regarding Sayyidah Zainab in Bilad al-Sham. And so the report that I'm about to quote is mainly taken from Ahmad al-Shaykh al-Saduq in Majlis 31, Hadith number 3. And a similar report can be found in Tarikh al-Tabari, volume 19, page 173 to 175. The report says, and this is with an isnad to one of Ibn Ziyad's gatekeepers. So Ibn Ziyad ordered them back to the jail, and he sent the glad tidings of the death of al-Hussein to the frontiers. Then he called for the girls and the head of al-Hussein, and they were taken to the Levant. They were taken to Bilad al-Sham. A group that went out with that troop narrated to me, throughout the nights they would hear the lament of the jinns over al-Hussein until the break of dawn. And we went over this in our biography of al-Imam al-Hussein salamullah, and I believe there are asanid to a Sayyidah Salama, who swears that the jinn used to weep over Abu Abdullah salamullah alayh. The narration continues, "When we entered Damascus, the women and the girls were brought into daylight with their faces uncovered. The cold people of the Levant said, 'We have never seen girls more beautiful than these. Who are you?' So Sakina bint al-Hussein alayhi salam said, 'We are the daughters of the family of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.' So they went to the stairs of the mosque where the girls were made to stand, and among them was Ali ibn al-Hussein salamullahi alayhi, who on that day was a young man. An elder from the elders of the Levant came to them and said to them, 'Alhamdulillah, who has killed you, destroyed you, and cut off the age of sedition,' and he did not stop insulting them. When he finished his words, Ali ibn al-Hussein alayhi salam asked him, 'Have you not read the book of Allah?' He said, 'Yes.' So then he asked him, 'Have you not read this verse? Say, I do not ask you for a reward for this except the love of those near of kin?' He said, 'Of course.' So Imam Sajjad told him, 'So we are them.' Then he said, 'Do you not read and give to those near of kin their right?' He said, 'Of course.' He said, 'So we are them.' Then he said, 'Do you not read this verse? Allah only desires to keep the uncleanliness away from you, O people of the house, and to purify you a thorough purification?' He said, 'Of course.' So Imam Sajjad told him, 'So we are them.' So the man from the Levant raised his head to the sky and said, 'Ya Allah, I repent to you 3 times. Ya Allah, for you I dissociate from the enemy of the family of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and the killers of the Ahlulbayt of Muhammad. I have read the Quran but never noticed this before today.' Then the women of Abu Abdullah, the family of al-Hussein, were brought to Yazid ibn Muawiyah. The women of the family of Yazid and the daughters of Muawiyah and his family cried out and grieved. The head of al-Hussein was put in front of them. So Sakina salamullahi alayha said, 'By Allah, I have never seen a harder heart than that of Yazid, nor have I seen a disbeliever or pagan more evil than him and more cold than him. He came in and said while looking at the head, I wish my elders in Badr could witness the wails of Khazraj as the spear struck.' Then he called for the head of al-Hussein and installed it at the gate of the Mosque of Damascus." This next report comes from Abi Mikhnaf, and this report is found in Tarikh al-Tabari, and it can also be found in Kitab al-Mu'jam al-Kabir by al-Tabarani, and we'll put these up on the screen shortly. And the report was authenticated by al-Haythami in Majma' al-Zawaid. So these reports, they say pretty much the same thing. The report says and we're reading the one from Abi Mikhnaf. He narrates with a chain to a Mawla of Yazid ibn Muawiyah, la'inahullah. He says, when the head of al-Hussein was put in front of Yazid, Yazid recited the following poem. Swords split the skulls of men who are dear to us, but they were more disobedient and oppressive. But then he added, yet by God, Hussein, if I had been to fight you, I would not have killed you. It has been further reported, and this is also mentioned in multiple sources. The one that I'm going to quote is Kitab al-Rad ala al-Muta'assib al-Anid al-Mani' min Dhammi Yazid. And this is a book by Ibn Jawzi with a very long title. But in this book, he reports with a chain to Mujahid, he reports the following. He says, Yazid recited the following, would that my elders who fought and died at Badr had witnessed at Uhud the steadfastness of the Khazraj when the spears fell. We have now killed their leading lords and successfully adjusted the inequality of Badr. They would have broken into shouts of joy. They would have said, O Yazid, don't ask. I shall not be a descendant of Khindif if I do not take revenge on the Beni Ahmed for what he did. The Beni Hashim coveted royalty, although no news had come down and no revelation was sent. Al-Tabari further reports, and this can be found on page 175 to page 176, with his chain to Abdullah al-Thumali, that Yazid la'inahullah was poking the mouth of al-Hussein when he recited the verses. One of the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was present, and his name was Abu Barza al-Aslami. So he cried out, are you poking the mouth of al-Hussein with your cane? Take your cane away from his mouth. How often have I seen the Messenger of Allah kiss it? As for you, Yazid, you will come forward on the day of resurrection, and Ibn Ziyad will be your advocate. But this man will come forward on the day of resurrection, and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam will be his advocate. Then he got up and turned away. Abi Mikhnaf reported, and once again, we are quoting the Maqtal, and this will be found on the same page. He reports on the authority of Abu Umar al-Absi that Yahya ibn al-Hakam, the brother of Marwan, la'inahullah, recited, the heads on the plain were closer in kinship than Ibn Ziyad, the slave with false lineage. The offspring of Umayyah has become as numerous as stones, while the daughter of the Apostle of Allah has lost her offspring. Yazid ibn Muawiyah then struck his hand against the chest of Yahya ibn al-Hakam and shouted, be quiet. Al-Tabari further reports, and this can be found on page 171, page 172, as well as a similar report in the Amali of Shaykhuna Saduq, rahimahullah. He reports the following, and this chain goes back to a Sayyidah Fatima bint Ali. She narrates, when we were made to sit before Yazid, he showed pity to us, ordered things for us, and was kind to us. Then a Syrian with a red face stood up before Yazid and said, Commander of the Faithful, give me this one. He meant me. I was a pretty young girl. I shuddered and moved away, for I thought that that would be allowed to them. I caught hold of the skirt of my sister Zainab, and my sister Zainab was older and more cleverer than I. She said that would not happen. She said to the Syrian, by Allah, you are a liar. By Allah, you are too lowly born. Such a thing is not for you nor for him. So Yazid cried out angrily, by Allah, you are a liar. That is for me. If I wish to do it, I can do it. So Zainab replied, no, by Allah, Allah would only let you do that if you left our faith and professed belief in another religion. So Yazid screamed, distraught with anger, dare you face me in this way? It is your father who has left the religion and your brother. And so Zainab replied, you, your father, and your grandfather have been guided by the religion of Allah, the religion of my father, and the religion of my brother and my grandfather. So he shouted at her, enemy of Allah, you lie. So she responded, you, a commander who has authority, are vilifying unjustly and oppressed with your authority. And so Fatima bint Ali alayhi salam continues, by Allah, it is as if he were ashamed and he became silent. The Syrian repeated, Commander of the Faithful, give me that girl. So Yazid said to him, go away, may Allah strike you dead. Regarding this encounter, this is reported by Ali ibn al-Athir in his history book, Usud al-Ghaba fi Ma'rifat al-Sahaba, on page 1526 to 1527. He says that this exchange is very, very famous. Says his exact words are, her speech to Yazid is well known when the Levantine asked her about her sister Fatima, the daughter of Ali, and she eloquently responded, displaying intelligence and strength of character as mentioned in the historical accounts. Now, before we continue, and I think all of you listening have been waiting eagerly for this, I am now going to go over the khutbah of a Sayyidah Zainab. Salamullahi alayha. Now, the khutbah of a Sayyidah Zainab, this report is very, very important. It is very interesting. It is near and dear to many people around the world. However, many people, when asked about the source for it, they are simply left at a loss to explain where this khutbah comes from. Correct? And this khutbah is extremely important. And inshallah, we will read it out in a bit. Unlike the khutbah fadakiya in our biography of Fatima, we did not go over the actual khutbah because it's very long and it's very powerful, and it loses a lot of its meaning if someone like me tries to go over it. However, this one we have to go over simply because we wish to do Sayyidah Zainab justice and to highlight just how strong she was in such a difficult situation. And so, regarding the isnad, regarding the source for al-khutbah al-fadakiya, if I may, do some historiography, inshallah. This report comes from a book called Balaghatun Nisa by Ahmad ibn Abi Tahir Tayfur. And I'm using a very rare print of this book. If you try to find this book online, you probably will not find this print. It is found on page 38 to page 40. Correct? And this report is corroborated by another source, which we'll go over in a second. The report here, Abi Tahir begins the report by saying he said. So whenever we see a historian do this, he says qal, correct? He is quoting the previous source. We see this oftentimes in books such as Ansab al-Ashraf and Tarikh al-Tabari. So that means we have to go to the report before in order to see the isnad, in order to see who is transmitting this. So if we go to page 37 of the same book, we read the following. He says, وحدثني هارون بن مسلم بن سعدان عن الحسن بن علوان عن عطية العوفي. So, Atiyya al-Awfi, those of you who have been following us for a while, you know exactly who this is. This is a very famous tabi'i, a Shia who is an enemy of al-Hajjaj, who, he had to flee west or east to Khurasan in order to escape the clutches of Bani Umayyah. And if those of you who watched our bio of Jabir, you'll recognize him as the man who did ziyarah of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alongside Jabir ibn Abdullah. Correct? So the report continues. And one more thing before I forget, this report is also found in Kitab Maqtal al-Hussein by al-Khawarizmi on page 71 to page 74. And as you can see, it is quite long. And he reports this with a different chain entirely. His chain goes back to an unknown narrator. So we see here that we have two different asanid for this khutbah, and they're both very, very similar. And so I think that if anyone wishes to dispute the authenticity of this khutbah, they are simply being a mu'anid, because there are many well-known historical issues, including the Maqtal of Abu Abdullah himself, that mainly come through one report. So here we have two. Most of the time when studying Islamic history, if we get three or more, we call it a day. But two is still acceptable. So the report says that when Zainab alayhi salam heard Yazid mocking her ancestors with his poetry, she said the following: Allah and his messenger told the truth, O Yazid, when they said that the final state of those who do evil deeds was that they denied the signs of Allah and they used to ridicule them. And this is an ayah in the Quran. Do you think, O Yazid, that you have seized the vastness of the earth from us and constrained the sky upon us, and that we are being herded like the prisoners are herded, that Allah wishes humiliation for us and honor for you, and that this is a great importance for you with Allah? So you are being haughty and looking around exuberantly and happily, since you see that the world is in your control and its affairs are lined up for you. But wait and slow down, for Allah the praise and the elevated says, let the faithless not suppose that the respite that we grant them is for the good of their souls. We give them respite only that they may increase in sin, and eventually there is a humiliating punishment for them. Is it just, O son of the freed ones, the tulaqa, to cover your women and slave girls with veils while you parade the daughters of Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam as prisoners? You have torn their apparel coverings, exposed their faces, and the enemies ushered them on from one city to another. The dwellers of the caravans as well as the cities were looking towards them, and the people from near and far as well as the noble and the servants were scrutinizing their faces, while they had neither a helper from their men. How isn't he spiteful, i.e. Yazid, spiteful against us, while he looks at us with hostility, scorn, bitterness, and grudges? You say, I wish my ancestors at Badr were witnessing this with perfect intrepidity, intrepidity, and without imagining that you are committing a sin, and you say this while you strike Aba Abdullah on his teeth with a stick. And why wouldn't you be like this? For you have scratched the old wound and revived the past animosity by shedding the blood of the offspring of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the stars of the earth from the family of Abdul Muttalib. You will surely return to Allah with their necks tightly bound, and you will wish that you were blind and deaf and that you had not spoken. So rejoice and celebrate while you still can. O Allah, take our right from those who had usurped it. Take revenge from those who have oppressed us. By Allah, by doing what you have done, you have pierced your own skin. Or by Allah, by doing what you have done, you have pierced your own skin and have torn your own flesh. You will surely be presented to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam with your crime of violating the sanctity of his family and his flesh at the holy gathering where Allah shall gather them, the descendants of the Prophet, from the state of being scattered, and will bring all of them together in paradise. And this is the saying of Allah Jalla wa Ala, do not think of those who are slain for the cause of Allah as dead. They are alive with their Lord and receive sustenance from Him. It suffices for you to know that on the day of judgment, Allah will be the judge, and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam will be the plaintiff against you. Those who facilitated the government for you and imposed you on the necks of the Muslims will know how evil shall be the recompense of the transgressors, and who among you will be in the worst place and the most misguided. I swear by Allah, O enemy of Allah and the son of the enemy of Allah, that I consider you to be humble and not fit to be reprimanded and reproached. But what am I to do? Our eyes are shedding tears, our hearts are burning, and that cannot happen by our reprimanding and reproaching you. And she's referring to their martyrs coming back to life. Al-Hussein alayhi salam has been killed, and the party of shaitan is taking us to the party of fools so that they may get their reward for insulting Allah. These hands extinguish our blood, and these mouths strip our flesh, and those decaying corpses are sweetened by the honey of hypocrisy. If you take us as booty, you will be taken as one who is in debt when you find nothing but what your hands have offered. You will cry out, O Ibn Marjana, for help, and your followers will cry out with you at the scale. You have found the best provision to be the provision of Muawiyah, who killed the offspring of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. By Allah, I fear none but Allah, and I complain only to Allah. So plan your schemes, exert your efforts, and direct your endeavors. By Allah, never will be the disgrace of what you have presented to us be removed from you. All praise is due to Allah, who sealed the fate of happiness and forgiveness for the leaders of the youths of paradise, granting them paradise. I ask Allah to elevate their ranks and to bestow upon them more of His grace, for He is the Almighty Guardian. Continuing, and again, we have to pause for a moment because that was indeed very, very powerful. This khutbah deserves the recognition, it deserves the praise. There is nothing in the Arabic language that can allow us to praise Sayyidah Zainab for these words, and this is what we would come to expect from the daughter of Amir al-Mu'mineen Salamullah alayh, and the sister of the two masters of the youth of paradise. At-Tabari further reports that following the interactions, and the reports indicate that they were with Yazid for a few days. Inshallah, if we ever go over the bio of Imam Sajjad again, we'll go over the khutbah of Imam Sajjad. But in the aftermath, Yazid simply realized that keeping the Ahlulbayt in Syria for an extended period of time was not to his political advantage, and so he ordered the infamous Sahabi An-Nu'man ibn Bashir to equip them with what will be useful for them and to send a good, faithful Syrian with them. Send horsemen and helpers with them, and let him go to Medina with them. Next, he ordered the women to be lodged in an isolated house. With them, he sent what would be useful for them. Their brother Ali ibn al-Hussein was with them in the house. They left and went to Yazid's house. There was not a single one of the women of the family of Muawiyah who did not meet them with tears and weeping for al-Hussein. They continued the lamentation for him for 3 days, and Yazid never ate lunch or dinner without inviting Ali ibn al-Hussein to join him. One day he invited him, and he invited Amr ibn al-Hasan ibn Ali, who was still a young boy, and he said to Amr, as though playfully, "Will you fight this boy?" meaning his own son Khalid. And so Amr replied, "No, but give me a knife and give him a knife, then I will fight him." And so Yazid rose, caught hold of him and embraced him. Then he said, "This is behavior that I recognize from the father. Does the snake bring forth anything but a snake?" And this is an Arab proverb. It basically means a chip off the old block, or like father, like son. So essentially, he's looking at Amr ibn al-Imam al-Hasan, salamullah alayhi, and saying, well, I wouldn't expect anything less from the son of Imam al-Hasan than to threaten to kill my own son, to ask me to give him a knife to do it. So when they were about to leave, Yazid la'inahullah summoned Ali ibn al-Hussein and said, may Allah curse Ibn Marjana. If I had been with your father, he would never have asked for a favor from me without my granting it to him. I would have protected him from death with all my power, even through the destruction of some of my own children. But Allah decreed what you have seen. Write to me from Medina and report everything that you need. So he presented clothes to them and entrusted them to his messenger. The latter went with them. He traveled with them at night so that they were in front of him, but not cut out of his sight. When they stopped, he would go aside from them, and he and his colleagues would spread out like a group of guards, and he would stay in such a position so that when anyone wanted to wash or carry out a natural need, he would not be ashamed. He never stopped asking them what they needed, and he treated them gently until they arrived at Medina. And so Fatima bint Ali alayhi salam reports, I said to my sister Zainab, sister, this Syrian has treated us well. Do you think we should give him a present? She replied, by Allah, we do not have anything that we can give him except our jewelry. I said, let us give him our jewelry. So I took my bracelet and armband, and she took her bracelet and armband, and we offered those to him. We apologized to him and said, this is your reward for the good way in which you have accompanied us. He replied, if what I have done was only for worldly wealth, there would be satisfaction and more in your ornaments. However, by Allah, I only did this for Allah and for your relationship to the Apostle of Allah. And I want to stop here to point out a very sad reality. We know that following the conclusion of Ma'rakat al-Taf, the Battle of Karbala, when al-Hussein alayhi salam and his companions were killed, the women of the Ahlulbayt were robbed of their possessions. And so we see here, however, that they are willingly offering them to the Syrian man who escorted them back to Medina. And that allows us to perceive a very harsh reality. That the Ahlul Bayt, despite all of their generosity, despite the fact that they would have willingly given everything they had for this simple kindness of respecting their relationship to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in spite of that, their tents were sacked and they were taken prisoner. And they were robbed of their possessions, their jewelry, and their clothes. And so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send his la'an upon Yazid and Ibn Marjana and all those that made this calamity possible. And to conclude, as for the death of a Syeda Zainab, bint Ali salamullahi alayha, I have been unable to locate any reliable reports regarding the time and reasoning for her death, as well as her burial place. However, according to some of our ulama, the most likely burial place for her is in al-Madinah, as that is where the reports last indicate she was. And so it would be most likely that she is buried in Jannatul Baqi' alongside her husband, alongside some of her children or some of her descendants. With that being said, or rather not her children, I'm sorry, some of her relatives, some of the Bani Hashim who are also buried in al-Baqi'. With that being said, we know that there is a popular shrine for her in Syria, there is a shrine for her in Egypt, and visiting such shrines, there's no issue with it as long as one's intention is simply to pay respect to this great lady. And I think it's a lovely irony. I think it's a very beautiful irony that today people in Damascus flock to the shrine of a Syeda Zainab, who was only in Damascus, we would say, for a short amount of time, essentially as a prisoner. And so we would ask ourselves, to all the people who say that Yazid and Bani Umayyah won, who really won? Was it the Syeda Zainab and her nephew Ali ibn al-Hussein, who to this day people flock to al-Masjid al-Umawi, wanting to see the spot where he once stayed? Or was it Muawiyah and Yazid and Ibn Marjana, who have been left nothing but the most pathetic of defenders, and no evidence whatsoever that they once ruled over the entire Islamic world, except for a scant mention within the books of history? We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us and to bless our brothers and sisters, particularly the ones in Bilad al-Sham, because as of the time of the recording of this lecture, our Mu'min brothers and sisters in Lebanon are going through very difficult times. We ask Allah, بحق السيدة زينب سلام الله عليها, بحق محمد وآل محمد, أن يفرج عنهم, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, بحق محمد وآل محمد, reunite us with our Salaf al-Salih, reunite us with Syeda Zainab, and send our heartfelt condolences to the Imam of our time, Sahib al-Asr wa Zaman. Ajjallah Faraj al-Sharif. It will conclude with Surah Al-Fatiha. تسبقها الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد.